Hi, my name's Jim. I'll be with you for the next 15 minutes. I've been listening to these, and you know how when you're a kid you listen to a voice recording of yourself and you think, wow. I'm past that now, but I'm trying to decide who I sound like. And I always thought before that I sounded like Carlton the Doorman from the show Rhoda. If you can remember that, he was a faceless character that came over the intercom in this apartment building that Rhoda lived in after the Mary Tyler Moore Show in New York. He'd say, "Hi, this is Carlton the Doorman," and the whole joke of it was he sounded like he was drunk and slurring his words, and I always thought that's what I sounded like. Well, somebody the other day told me that I had the sound and canter of Bob Ross, the famous public television painter that everybody's in love with again, and he's long dead, the guy with the big curly hair. And so I listened again, trying to hear Bob Ross and myself, and all I can hear now is Grandpa. Now that seems a little odd and way out there, but listen to yourself. I bet you sound like Grandpa or Grandma. Today I'm talking about the camp. The camp was a place that I spent my early 20s a couple years in, and it was actually called the Jap Camp. And the way it got its name was there was a family that were Japanese and they were farmers. And they lived there and farmed, and I'm not sure what they farmed up in the mountains. I know lettuce grew well, and if you know what you're doing farming, you can farm some stuff there. But when World War II came, the whole family was carted off to an internment camp. I guess never to return again. I was working at a place, and I had a buddy that worked named Roger, and he was telling me about this place, and he said there's some old empty cabins there, and that one guy had brought electricity into his cabin, so we could probably borrow some of his electricity and we could fix up one of these cabins, and it was cool and all that. So we went and looked at it and decided, let's fix one of these cabins up. It was a main house that this guy Dan, and I knew him from before, he's an old friend, but I didn't know he was living there. And then two smaller cabins. One Roger's cousin Dave was fixing up, Dave and some other guy. And then this other cabin, Roger and I took on the daunting task of fixing it up. We had to re-chink it. I'm not sure what we had to do to the roof. We ran an electric line, thanks to Dan, and just buried a heavy-duty extension cord under the ground. Got a really nice wood stove from a rancher out by a town 10 miles away. Had to oil the logs, and they just drank up the oil and fix it up. Put some windows in where the glass was broken, and it turned into a nice little cabin. It was just so nice, and it was cozy and warm, and it was a fun place. Life at Jap Camp became wonderful. It was situated on about a 5,000 acre ranch, and I'm not sure if it was part of that ranch when the Japanese family had to leave, or if somehow over the years the ranch bought up that property or what, but it was on a 5,000 acre ranch, and once in a while the owner of the ranch come and want us to help them hay or something to pay for living there, because nobody could afford anything. We were just living there for free, but we fixed the place up. It was really nice. Besides the three cabins, there was a big shed that was in three parts, and part of it you could tell was a chicken shed, and probably another part of the shed was for storing tools or whatever. And then there was a real nice barn. And so it was kind of this point of pride. You lived at Jap Camp. There was no running water, so we had an outhouse, and I remember in the wintertime you brought the seat of the outhouse into the cabin set by the stove, so when you had to go, at least you wouldn't freeze your butt. For a bath in the summertime, I'd go over to this creek running down the hill, and there's a little wide spot in the creek, and there's sand, and I'd lay in there and I'd rub sand all against me, and then roll into the the swift part of the water and kind of swim against the tide, and it rinsed me off. That was great, except one day into my second year there, I was walking up the creek just seeing where the headwaters were, and there's a dead, decomposing cow in the water. I never took another bath in the creek. I lived a life that made me feel like I was an Indian. I started almost believing I was an Indian. I didn't work, a standard job. I would hitchhike to a nearby town and feed this guy's horses every day. And I had an old pickup truck, but I couldn't afford gas to drive there. It would have never paid for itself if I would have driven to town every day to feed the horses. But I had a horse. I bought a horse, and his name was Fabian. And I thought that was a terrible name, Fabian. Remember Fabian? So I changed his name to Tonka Wicon, like a good Indian's horse. And we just did things like hunt and fish and work the ranch a little, and it was a great place. One day, Dan needed to go to the grocery store, so I rode with him. And on the way, he pulled over. We were on the straight stretch, and in the mountains, there's not a lot of roads that are straight for a long distance, so this was called the straight stretch. He said, "Did you see that?" I go, "What?" And there was a trail in the snow that you could follow, and there's a big something standing there in the middle of this hay meadow. So we ran out, and hey, that's a bird. Dan grabbed a rug, and we ran over to it, and it was an eagle. And he just looked at us, and as we came closer, he spread his wings big and went, "Ah!" Dan threw the blanket over him, the rug over him, and I jumped on him and grabbed him, got him back to the car, and the blanket was over his head, right? And we still had to go to the grocery store, so we went to the store. Dan got his stuff, and I was in the car holding the eagle. And I kept thinking, if this eagle gets this blanket off, he's going to just peck me to pieces. But luckily, got him home, okay. And every day I'd let that eagle outside. It couldn't fly. He just couldn't fly. He'd chase the dogs around. The dogs would run from him. It was funny, and we'd catch him and put him back in the barn. I caught brook trout thinking he'd eat, and he wouldn't. And after a couple days, we got worried about him. I called Fish and Game or somebody, and they had somebody that fixes birds. And so they came and they got him, and they promised that they'd tell us how the bird came out. Never heard another word. I take it the bird was okay and he could fly again. I always thought maybe he had been poisoned, was too weak to fly. But we saved that bird, and there's a picture of me holding the bird on our website. He was a young golden eagle, they told us. So he wasn't a bald eagle, but he was a big bird, and he was a handful. I had a dog. Everybody had a dog. We all had dogs. And my dog's name was Doe, and she's kind of she's probably less than a year old. We lived there, and there's 6 people live there, and probably 8, 9 dogs. And one day, a couple of us went to this one little bitty shed to check out what was in it, and opened the door, and there's a bunch of junk, and talking about what should we do with this. And Doe wandered in and licked something, and next thing I know, she was going through convulsions. And within minutes, she died in my arms. And I figured it must have been coyote poisoning, probably from somebody that had sheep or something sometime in the past. Maybe the Japanese farmers, I don't know. Long story short, my dog died like that, and I buried her out on the hill. But we were watching this girl's dog that had puppies while we were watching. She went out of town somewhere. When she got home, she heard about Doe, and so she gave me one of the pups. And that dog turned in to be the best dog I ever had. I named her Baloo, like Cat Baloo. Baloo dog. She lived to be 17. My buddy Roger, he had a dog that was half Siberian Husky and half coyote, and was pretty dog. Looked like a coyote, only had the fullness of a husky. And that dog taught old Baloo how to hunt and how to do a lot of things. And I remember the first time Baloo was just a pup. She wasn't very old, maybe 4, 5, 6 months, and went out into this hay pasture that had been just hayed, and there were rats and mice all over the place. And old Roger's dog, Alicia, would grab these mice, bite it, throw it in the air, catch it, bite it again, swallow it, all in one fluid motion. So old Baloo, she's a smart dog. She tried that. The first time she tried it, she grabbed the mouse and the mouse bit her on the lip. She went to throw it up and the mouse didn't let go. It was dangling there and she's whining. So I had to step on the mouse, pull the dog off of it. But you know what? Old Baloo turned into a great hunter. She could catch anything. She was such a good dog. So sometimes something bad, something good happens. True all that. I lost Doe, but I got Baloo. I had an old 52 Chevy pickup, like I told you, but the thing was old. It was 1952, and this was back in the early 70s. The only way we could keep the place warm was with wood, but the house was insulated real good, and it was really, really nice. We had re-chinked it and everything. But I had this girlfriend, and we broke up. And the next thing I know is she moving in with Roger, my roommate, my cabin mate. And so it was a bad situation for everybody. So I moved down to the shed. Now the shed had a dirt floor. Winter was on us. No door, no window, no stove or anything. So I went and there's always all these old wood stove parts in the irrigation ditches. So I went and I found enough parts and put a wood stove together. And that sucker smoke until the fire got really hot. It just smoke and smoke and smoke. Put a blanket over the door, plastic over the window, and I stayed there all winter. It was so cold in there. I don't know how I didn't freeze to death. When it's 40 degrees below zero outside the middle of the mountains, and you have a blanket for a door, and a stove that long went out and the place is full of smoke anyway, it is survival 101. I would wake up in the morning and run outside to put my clothes on because the sun was at least shining there. It was a one miserable winter. It was a terrible winter. I remember I felt like I couldn't talk to any girls because I smelled like smoke and I was filthy dirty and I was about to starve to death. And I started wondering, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this when just 10, 12 miles away is my hometown and I could work? I could live in my parents' basement. They lived in California and the house, they kept the house on. And so after that second winter, I left the Jap camp. And those memories are with me today. My wife and I went back there a few years ago. It was much smaller than what I remember. You know how that works? You go back somewhere and everything's smaller. But one thing I always wanted to tell our neighbors was we weren't hippies, we're mountain men. Now later in life I went to Walden, Colorado, and they have real life mountain men there living in those mountains right in town, wearing buckskin. And that was nothing like that. I was just some deranged 22-year-old guy thinking he was a mountain man, escaping back to the warmth of his parents' basement in the middle of the mountains. But I survived, and it was a great, great experience. I should have been working and doing something else all that time, but I wasn't. I was still sowing those wild oats. It seemed to take me quite a while to sow, but they got sowed, and I'm here now to tell you about it. This is good therapy for me sometimes. I hope you enjoy listening. It won't always be the same old stories, because a person only does so much in their life. My apologies to Native Americans everywhere. I have no idea what you folks had to go through. I was just a little tripped out, and somehow spiritually I thought I was relating. The Jap camp is behind me, and the grandkids are upon me. Life is good. Always remember, never forget, that kindness is one of the best things you can do and be. Peace out.